talking Giants football with Brandon Olsen, who you might recognize from LockedOn Gators. Brandon Olsen, writer for Giants Country, stops by the LockedOn Giants podcast. That's coming your way next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina, and on today's show, which is brought to you in part by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Today, we're going to be talking with a guy who does it all. He does Locked On Gators. He contributes over at Giants Country, so he knows the New York Giants pretty well. Brandon Olsen, who I'm happy to have on the program. Brandon, welcome to the Locked On Giants podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I know we've been talking about having you come on for the longest time now, and here you are. And Brandon, a lot to talk about with this team. You know, a surprise win over the Tennessee Titans. You know, new coaching staff sort of pulling everything together. The moxie by Brian Daboll on that 2-point conversion. Daniel Jones looking mostly decent. Saquon Barkley looking like Saquon. Where do we start with this team? I mean, what jumped out most to you when you watched this game unfold on Sunday?
I think the biggest thing was just the decision making of Brian Daboll. It was just, you can tell it's a kind of attitude that we haven't had with the Giants in quite some time, where he's just like that 2-point conversion call was one of the gutsiest things that we've seen in quite some time from the Giants. And it's just like, okay, like this is the modern New York Giants, and it's something that I'm incredibly excited for.
You know, you mentioned modern New York Giants. When you look at what Daboll and Mike Kafka and Wink Martindale have brought to this team, how much of a difference do you see, you know, where you could say, this ain't your grandfather's Giants team. This is a current NFL team. Where do you see the biggest differences other than, you know, obviously the moxie that Daboll has shown?
I think it kind of starts up front, really, that we're looking at. I think the offensive line, as rough as they looked at sometimes, looked improved from what we saw. I mean, Andrew Thomas continued his great stretch that he had last season. Evan Neal, ups and downs. We'll say that. We'll say ups and downs. Left guard obviously was a big issue, but I mean, you're going against Jeffrey Simmons, and he's top 3 interior defensive linemen in the NFL, if we're being honest. It's him. Aaron Donald is right up there, obviously, and like Kenny Clark is just like 3 of the most dominant interior defensive linemen. And I think that, you know, throwing Joshua Ezeudu against there is a little bit of a baptism by fire, we'll say, for him. But I think up front we're going to see a lot of improvements throughout the rest of the season, I think.
Yeah, certainly room to grow. And, you know, let's look at some of the individual player performances. Got to start with Daniel Jones. Now, you did a piece for Giants Country breaking down basically the good, the bad, the ugly of Daniel Jones. Let's talk about the decision making. Do you think, you know, if the Giants had to make a decision today based on that performance by Jones about his future, are you feeling good about the direction he's headed?
I think he's improved, but I don't think that the team would go, okay, like he's our franchise quarterback, especially after one game where I feel like the offensive game plan was kind of catered to be like, this is what he can do, but we're limited in some ways. And I think that there were still some of the things we've seen where it's like, well, that's Daniel Jones, where the Saquon interception was just, it was a horrible decision. He was looking at Saquon the entire time. And I even pointed out in the article, I was like, on the right side, you had a little China concept going, which is a corner from the innermost receiver and 2 in routes. And Sterling Shepard was there was a window to get that ball to Sterling Shepard. And then he chose to throw it to Saquon. And then on the sideline, he's like, I was going for a back shoulder throw. It wasn't back shoulder. So you're talking decision making is poor there. And the throw was about as bad as you can get if you're talking about back shoulder. So I think you still saw the things that made Giants fans in the first place go, oh my goodness, Daniel Jones again. And so I think right now the staff would go, you didn't show us enough to make us think that you're going to be the future.
But what good things did he show that at least give you some hope that maybe he can get there?
He made much smarter decisions for the most part. Throughout most of the game, it was smarter decisions than we've seen. He took the easier, more conservative options that we saw, but they were there. There were some times where he didn't, of course, but I mean, every quarterback does that. That's the thing. It seems like it's a very nitpicky thing, like the strip sack. It's like, well, Jeffrey Simmons got there in 2.4 seconds. So it's hard to say, oh, hey, you could have made a better decision, but he was looking at Daniel Bellinger, didn't throw it. And it's like, I understand where he came from, because in his mind, you can see he kind of shifts his head. He looks like he's looking for Sterling Shepard deeper downfield. He's looking for a bit of a bigger play. So that's one of those nitpicky things where you had a receiver available. You didn't take it because you were looking for a bigger play, and then you just got blown up from behind there. But you kind of saw I want to say he looked more confident than we've seen him look in quite some time. Like the back shoulder throw, even, I feel like he wouldn't have even attempted that at some points, but he did. He went for it. Didn't work out, but he went for it. And I feel like Brian Dable is going to kind of bring that out of Daniel Jones. He's going to say, you're not Josh Allen, but you can do a little bit more of Josh Allen things, which we saw the Sterling Shepard touchdown. That was a throw that I don't think anybody expected him to make, and he just heaved it deep, and it was great. I know some people were like, oh, he could have thrown it a little better. He had two linemen on the ground in front of him. He couldn't step into it. It was a great play on that one. That was a fantastic decision, and that was pure confidence.
Now let's talk about Saquon Barkley, because a lot of people were of the opinion that this offensive game plan was built around Saquon as opposed to Daniel. Do you agree with that? And what did Saquon show you that made you think, okay, this is the Saquon of 2018? Or did he show that he's the Saquon of 2018?
Oh, he absolutely showed, to me at least, that he was the Saquon of old that we haven't seen in quite some time. But I think the offense is going to be built around Saquon Barkley, and not just Saquon Barkley, to Saquon Barkley creating big plays, which you saw him do a few times. I mean, we saw the long run, which ended with a fumble, but hey, no harm, no foul, I guess we'll say there. But we saw the explosive plays from Saquon Barkley that we didn't really get to see. And Saquon, he's always been kind of a boom or bust runner, where we've seen him, get stopped for a loss a bunch of times, and he picks up a 60-yard run. He looked more consistent to me in this one. I realize it's very hard to be consistent against that Tennessee Titans defense. They're fast, they're physical, they're fantastic. But I think Saquon made the most of every opportunity he was given.
You mentioned Saquon's always been a boomer bust runner. If you're the Giants, do you invest big bucks in a boomer bust runner?
I don't know if you do. I wouldn't. Me personally, I just wouldn't say, hey, you're boomer bust. We're going to go for it. I think it's one of those things where that's great to have, but if you're going to give him the ball, they even what 18 times on Sunday, or running the ball at least. I feel like I don't want boomer bust there. I feel like that's going to put us in too many. You run on 1st and 10, then you're in 2nd and 10, 2nd and 12, and it's very hard to convert at that point. So I wouldn't go with a boomer bust runner, but Brian Dable looks like he's going to be very confident about certain things. So if he thinks that it's worth it, he's going to do it.
Yeah, indeed. Now, before we move off of the offense, a big question that I've been getting is about the receiver rotation. Why wasn't Kadarius Toney more involved? Why wasn't Kenny Golladay, more involved? And Brian Dable kind of answered that question. He basically said, with regards to Kadarius Toney, you have to earn your snaps. Now, I know you probably saw Kadarius Toney when he was in college. What's up with this guy? Can he put it all together? Is it just have injuries sapped him from what he's capable of doing? Or is he just, because the position is still relatively new to him? If I'm not mistaken, I think he switched over from quarterback early in his college career. What's the deal with him, do you think?
I gotta say, I have no idea. I genuinely, I think that Kadarius Toney is one of the most dynamic football players that I've ever seen. Just with the ball in his hands, he's so fantastic, but he struggles getting off press coverage. That's something that's always been a thing for him. If he gets a release, he can shake anybody, but it's a matter of, can you get that release? Can you kind of say Kadarius Toney is backyard football. Like, he is just playground football. He is anarchy. You saw it with what looked like a pass attempt from him that became a fantastic rush. but he's just so much of a freestyle player. We saw that a lot in Florida too. I know most of the people listening to this aren't Gators fans, but we saw it in Florida a lot too, where he would freestyle with certain things and kind of take liberties because he knows with the ball in his hands, he's a human joystick type of player. I think it's a matter of kind of, I don't want to say knowing your role here, but it's about, like Dable said, you kind of have to earn your snaps and you kind of have to show you can be consistent. And Kadarius Toney is someone who, dating back to college, has struggled with injuries. So it's hard to earn those snaps when you're not on the field.
When he is on the field, though, how can Dable and Kafka unlock the full extent of his talents?
I think keeping him short might be your best bet there. I realize that a lot of people are like, oh, he's incredibly fast. He is shiftier and quicker than he is. He's fast, don't get me wrong, but he is way better just with the ball in his hands. Use him on those end arounds, jet sweeps, reverses, whatever it is. Just get him the ball short and let him make plays. I think he's capable of creating separation deeper down the field. Because again, it's hard to keep up with that man. He has no ACLs. He's just going in every direction possible with reckless abandon. But I think it's a matter of just get him the ball short. He's that gadgety type player that gets a bad rap. I think it's a fantastic thing when you're looking at the modern day NFL, and it's like, well, it's about getting the ball to playmakers in space. He's a fantastic playmaker, so find a way to get him the ball in space.
Hey, business owners, as you gear up for fall, you need the right people on your team to help make your small business fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find those people that you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond, the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so that your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so that you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and who you'd like to hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. Post your job for free today on LinkedIn Jobs. Go to linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, you're listening to the Locked On Giants podcast. I am Patricia Traina, and my special guest is Brandon Olsen. You probably know him from his hosting gig over at Locked On Gators, but he's also very well versed in the New York Giants. He writes for Giants Country, which is the site that I run over for Fan Nation, part of SI.com. So we're talking Giants today with a little bit of, Gators sprinkled in because, there's that crossover always. Brandon, let's talk about this defense with Wink Martindale. We didn't see, I don't think, a whole lot of aggressiveness, that we thought we might see in this first game against the Titans. But I think we've got to start with the job they did against Derrick Henry, which is no easy task. They held him to under 100 yards, which a lot of defenses just don't do. What did you see from that game plan that was so successful in basically stifling Derrick Henry?
I think that was I feel like when it's Derrick Henry, it's got to be hard that you stop him with because that man runs like an animal. I know Tay Crowder, that one hit where he just lit him up. You don't see that happen to Derrick Henry, especially when he gets hit high. But it's a lot of just that front is physical, fast, and aggressive up front, an attacking mindset. I feel like you see that a lot when teams go against the Titans and Derrick Henry specifically. He is a boulder of a human being, and it's just very difficult to tackle him. But they seemed willing, able, and were just very aggressive. I think O'Shane Ximines played pretty well in the snaps that we saw him in. I think he was just one of the better games that we've seen from him. But I think it really comes down to creating opportunities in the backfield, eating those blocks and letting linebackers make their plays and just being aggressive and attentive there.
Do you think maybe the defense wasn't as aggressive because it was missing Ojulari and Thibodeau, or do you think it was just a matter of let's kind of get our feet underneath us, kind of see how we are coming together, and we'll turn it up as need be, or we'll dial it back?
I feel like it was kind of getting your feet wet with it. I feel like part of it was also just the way that Martindale's defense is going to be when you are aggressive and you are blitzing as frequently as we're going to see. I think part of that is it's easy to kind of lose your footing there. And if there's any kind of misdirection, you can get beaten by it. And the Titans are a team where they want to live and die by running the football. And so kind of just remaining a little more disciplined there and a little, I guess we'll say conservative up front there and not just sending the house all the time. But I think that as the season goes on and as this team kind of gets more chemistry together, I think that we're going to see them get very aggressive.
All right. Which is your biggest concern on defense, the inside linebackers or the cornerbacks?
Inside linebackers. Inside line, because at least when I look at the cornerbacks, I go, there's a lot of young guys here who it's just a matter of kind of finding a role for them and finding consistency there. So it's inside linebacker for me. That's a bigger concern because, yeah, when I look at corners, I see a lot of youth and I see a lot of potential there. And it's like, well, if we take our lumps there, hopefully they'll get better just with more experience.
So if you're Wink Martindale, having seen the inside linebackers get basically lit up in coverage, I think Tate Crowder and Austin Calitro had the two worst coverage ratings after that game. How do you try to minimize that? What tactics do you do to help those guys out?
I think it's very difficult to do that just because I think that's who they are as linebackers. I think they're just not fantastic in coverage. But hopefully part of it will get fixed as that defense gets more aggressive and there's more pressure being brought onto the quarterback. But I think generally and genuinely with this inside linebacker room, it's about just getting better cover players in there. As much as I hate being that guy, it's just like, oh, like it's week one. They're just not good enough. Everything we've seen so far indicates that you need to just get better talent there. And it's going to be hard to fix that just schematically unless you just go smaller and have less linebackers on the field. But again, against the Titans, you can't really do that with how they are. But maybe when you see a smaller offense and a quicker offense, you take a linebacker off the field, put more DBs out there, and you just hope that they can kind of supplement that.
Okay, I was going to save this for the next segment, but they've got the Panthers coming up with Christian McCaffrey, who's a little bit of a different animal than Derrick Henry. So do you maybe now take one of those linebackers off the field and put an extra DB in there because McCaffrey can just absolutely tear you a new one, both from a running perspective and as a receiver?
Yeah, I think this is the time where you see either another DB be brought on and a linebacker taken off, or you see this defense get very physical and very aggressive, and they try to kind of rattle Baker Mayfield and take advantage of a relatively young and average Panthers offensive line. And you go, well, as long as we're hitting Baker Mayfield and we're forcing these errant throws, we can kind of capitalize on it. And then also just obviously keeping an eye on Christian McCaffrey, who's one of the most shifty running backs out of the backfield that you have to worry about. So I think that you see them get really aggressive and kind of speed up the timer of Baker Mayfield a little bit. And you just hope that, Christian McCaffrey can't catch the ball if Baker Mayfield's in the backfield on the ground. So that's one way to supplement that.
Certainly. I want to go back to the Giants defense, and I want to talk about the job that Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams, the new dynamic duo, did against the Titans. You didn't hear their names called a whole lot, which sometimes is a good thing. But, what did you see from that dynamic duo?
I think Dexter Lawrence frustrates me for one reason. When he was coming out of college, I was so confident that he would not be as good as he currently is. So that's why he frustrates me, because I feel like every time he steps on the football field, he just shuts me up even more. And I think that he's just continuing to get better. But he's just fantastic. I think Leonard Williams is great. I think in this defense as well, they just work so well together, where it's one of those things where I'm like, hopefully the Giants extend Dexter, because I feel like every time I'm like, oh man, Giants defensive lineman's so good, they let him walk, whether it's Jonathan Hankins or any other time that they've done it. Hopefully the Giants extend him, because I think Dexter Lawrence is just one of the best young interior defensive linemen in the league right now.
And if they picked up his fifth-year option, so they like what they see. It didn't cost them a lot, and it's nice to see that maybe they're going to keep one of their drafted defensive interior guys as opposed to letting these guys walk, which they have done historically. Why, I don't know. Never made any sense to me because you couldn't build up continuity. So
Yeah, I feel like they're just like, oh, it's nose tackle. You can, those are a dime a dozen, but it's a very good nose tackle. You can't find that very frequently.
hey, Giant fans, BetOnline is the only place that offers the best information on the latest odds, contests, and player props for all your sports betting needs. No matter what sport you're into, BetOnline has you covered. Plus, they offer everything you need to know for live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head on over to BetOnline today to learn more about the trends in the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're talking with Brandon Olsen. He is the host of LockedOn Gators, but he's also a writer over on Giants Country. So he's multi-purpose. He does a lot of stuff. I mean, you guys don't know this, but he also does some stuff for the LockedOn Network behind the scenes. And we give him a lot of, grief, but he takes it in stride. He takes it in stride. He's one of our favorites here on the LockedOn Giants Network and on the LockedOn NFL Network. So yes, Brandon, we give you a lot of grief, but we love you. You know that. So
take in stride.
all right, we're talking New York Giants here, not LockedOn Gators. And Brandon, the big concern that Joe Schoen talked about when he spoke to the media a couple of weeks ago was overreaction Monday. He said, you're never as good as you look the first game. If you win, people will have you going to the Super Bowl. If you lose, people will have you headed for the number 1 draft pick. Somewhere, the Giants, they pulled out this win, but, they could have easily have lost it had Randy Bullock made that field goal. That said, when you look at this Giants team, you take the rose-colored glasses off and you look at this team objectively, do you feel they're headed in the right direction?
Yes, I think they're headed in the right. I still think it's going to be, another year or two before we're talking about a legitimate playoff team where, some things can swing their way. Like Giants should have lost this game, maybe, if you consider that kick that was a makeable kick just went wide left. I think you have to go, okay, like they should have lost that game, but they walked away with the win, and we'll take any win in any situation. But I think soon, in another year or two, we'll see the Giants where we're going into the season and saying, this is a playoff caliber team. I mean, you can look at the NFC East is a little weaker now with Dak on the mend for a little bit, and the Giants can maybe capitalize on that and have a nice little lead going in the standings there. But I think that playoffs are possible this year. Not likely, but possible. But in a year or two, we're looking at this Giants team and we're saying, they belong in the playoffs. And that's what I think we're looking at. I think my biggest concern and most people's biggest concern is what's going to happen at quarterback. But for the most part, you look at this roster and the makeup and just how they're playing in that one game, and you're saying they have a bright future just around this roster.
Yeah, it's definitely need some more parts. Joe Schoen doing the best he could with a horrible salary cap situation. That's going to be better next year. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be a lot better next year. He'll be able to supplement some of the holes that exist on this team that basically, the draft, you can only do so much with the draft because you got to get those kids up to speed. But Schoen seems to have an idea as to what this team needs and what direction to take it in. So I really like his forward thinking. We talked about the Giants way for a number of years, and the Giants way just wasn't working anymore. It was outdated, and it's almost like the rest of the league passed them by.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm very happy that Joe Schoen has the experience he has, especially with Buffalo, because they're one of those teams who they were bad a while back, and then they turned it around and they took their risks where they had to take their risks. I mean, obviously Josh Allen was, when he was coming out of the draft, a lot of people seemed to not want to acknowledge that he was as raw as you come. He was bad coming out of Wyoming, but it was like, hey, we have this lump of coal. Let's turn him into a diamond, and they did that. And I think that having the willingness to take those kind of risks, where even you could look at the Daniel Jones pick, where it's like, well, he was viewed as the safe option. It was, he's got a high floor, low ceiling. He's not going to make a ton of mistakes. I don't know where that came from. It came from, the receivers had a ton of drops at Duke. That won't happen in the NFL. He'll look way better. And you kind of look at they're looking to the future and they're looking at these high ceiling players, and that's something that it is just it's such a breath of fresh air as a Giants fan to actually see that.
Definitely. Now, before I let you go, we started to talk a little bit about the Giants' upcoming matchup against Carolina. We talked about Christian McCaffrey. I want to talk about the defense, though, because that Carolina defense is pretty stacked going against this Giants offensive line. Now, Andrew Thomas looks like he's even better than he was a year ago. He continues to rise. You've got a rookie on the other side, Evan Neal, very promising player, but he had a few hiccups in this game. The interior of the offensive line had a few hiccups, in the last game. What scares you or what concerns you most about the matchup with that Carolina defensive front versus that Giants offensive line?
I think it's how versatile they are and how creative they can be. Phil Snow, like I've been a fan of Phil Snow, the Carolina Panthers defensive coordinator, since the Baylor days with Matt Rule. Like I loved that defense and all the different fronts that they show. And it's similar to kind of with the Titans, where they're going to throw a lot of different things at you. And if you have an offensive line that isn't ready for them, you're going to have a very rough day. And especially just talent wise, they're very good. The Panthers, obviously, they've got a ton of talent on that defensive front. I mean, Brian Burns is a human wrecking ball at this point. He's just so good. And then I think that when you see the different fronts, there's going to be a good deal of one-on-one matchups for the Panthers defensive line against the Giants offensive line, because you'll see a 5-1 front every now and then from the Panthers. And they're just saying, hey, our guys will beat your guys in one-on-ones. That's part of the fun part about having a Brian Burns or a Derek Brown, is that it's very difficult to block them with one offensive lineman. So you'll have to throw a tight end or a running back in there, and you're taking away receiving options from the Giants. So I think that's the scariest part for me, is just when they do that, I think the Giants are going to have a very, very difficult time.
Do they have any weak links that the Giants can maybe take advantage of?
I think they're another team where I'm not super confident in their linebackers. The Panthers linebackers just not great. Shaq Thompson, he's great when you're playing video games. He's great in Madden because he's really athletic, and so is Corey Littleton. But I think that they leave you exposed a little bit. Damian Wilson, Frankie Louvu, they have a bunch of linebackers that I'm looking at and I'm saying Giants need to either attack the middle of the field throwing the ball, or if you can hit that second level with Saquon or even Daniel Jones, I'm cool with it. Then just say, okay, we have more explosive play opportunities. And then corner also is they have big names. They have great players with potential there, like CJ Henderson, JC Horn. When they're on, they can be great, but it's a matter of can they do it consistently? And we haven't seen that from either CJ Henderson or JC Horn yet.
So do you think the Giants can win?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the Giants have a better chance of winning this game than they had against the Titans, and they won that one. So, yeah, I definitely think the Giants can walk away with this one with a win.
All right. Well, it would be a big win. It's the Giants' home opener. So, and playing at MetLife Stadium in the past, at least recently, not always kind to the Giants. They say there's no place like home, and the Giants, have just kind of been a team where they just can't seem to get comfortable, whether it be at home or on the road. But it is a new era of Giants football.
Yeah, hopefully there's no place like home, because the Giants kept losing at it last time. So hopefully they'll be able to turn it around.
Indeed. Well, Brandon, appreciate you coming on. Folks, you can catch him on the LockedOn Gators podcast. Check out all our college hosts, by the way. If you want to know about the college prospects that are going to be in the draft next year, those are the people you want to go hit up. They know their stuff inside out. Brandon's really good. Again, he does write for Giants Country. He does excellent job with the film work. His latest article is a breakdown of Daniel Jones, kind of the good, the bad, the ugly. So check that out on Giants Country. As for us here on the LockedOn Giants podcast, tomorrow it's our crossover show. Julian Council, host of the LockedOn Panthers podcast, will be with us. We'll give you everything you need to know about Friday's matchup. And then on Sunday's matchup. And then on Friday, hopefully, fingers crossed, I'm still working out the details. Hopefully we have a live show, Trina and Tana, coming up. So you will not want to miss that, because it's always a lot of fun to have the entertainer on. So for Brandon Olsen, I'm Patricia Trainer. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or watching on YouTube your first watch of the day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow, Giant fans.